Hey you, yeah you, I have a confession to make. When I was a beginning quilter, I was terrified of triangles. I was afraid to sew them together because they never would match up. So I stopped even trying, and I only stuck to squares and rectangles because I was terrified to do anything else other than a square or a rectangle. Hexagons, out of the question. 5-sided blocks, there is no way. But now that I figured out the secret to doing triangles, I am a triangle queen. I love sewing together triangles, and I'm going to show you this trick in this tutorial that I'm calling Trippy triangles. So stay tuned. I can't wait to show it to you. So for today's tutorial, I'm going to be working with my 5-inch square stash. I have a whole bucket here full of 5-inch squares that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. But just know that you don't have to use 5-inch squares. You can use any size square. You can start with an 8-inch square, a 10-inch square, a 6-inch square. It doesn't matter. If you go smaller than 5 inches, it's just going to be just a little, you'll need way more of them. But just keep that in mind. This is a total user determined tutorial. So you can tailor this to however you want. The only stipulation is the 5-inch squares that you pick, you want to pick one light and one dark. So I have picked here one light and one dark, and I've chosen to have mine coordinate just so since this is a scrappy project, I just wanted my 2 squares that I chose at a time to coordinate, but you don't have to if you want it to be extra special scrappy, and that's fine too. So this is just completely up to you how you want to do it. So we're going to stack these on top of each other, your light 5-inch square and your dark one. And I like to line them up with the lines on my cutting board so that I know that it is nice and square. Let me move it up just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to take my triangle template. I'm just using the small simple wedge from Missouri Star, but you can use any triangle template that you want. And I've got at least 3 of them here in my stash. I don't know if you can see those. They're just all different angles of triangle. You can totally pick what you want. I've chosen to use this one, which is half of a 45-degree angle. And I like it because it's got a line, a dotted line right up the center. So I can put that right in the center of my square. And I've got lines on my cutting mat, so I know that that is right in the middle because I have lined my square up on the cutting mat, if that makes sense. So we're just gonna lay that right along the bottom edge and lined up. Now, if you wanted to, you could fold your charm square in half, make a little crease at the bottom and the top so that then you can line up that with your triangle. But I'm just lining mine up on the cutting mat, and that way I know that it's square. And I'm going to hold it down and make my first cut right along that triangle. So I've got my first cut there, and I do have my rotating cutting mat here. So all I need to do is spin it around, and I'm gonna make that second cut right down that triangle, like so. So now I've got these 3 pieces here, and I'm gonna take away my template and separate these. So I've got my lights and my darks, just like this, and like this. And I can actually put them back together like that, and then I still have my 5-inch square. So the next step is going to be to sew these together. And this is the trick when sewing together triangles so they don't end up wonky. And it took me a minute to learn this, but I'm gonna show it to you. It's very, very easy. When we do the first one, you see how these pieces, this has a nice pointy edge, but this one has this little part cut off right up here. That is gonna be the first sewing line we make. And we can just line that triangle right up there and flip it over and line it right. It just lines up perfectly right along there. And we are just gonna sew a 1/4 inch right down here. So let me go do that and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So there, I've sewn my line right down there, and I can just now flip this triangle over and finger press it. Got a little baby thread hanging off there. Come here. And I can just press that down towards the triangle. So now I've got these two pieces like this, and now I can take this piece and flip it over. The trick here is when you flip it over, you want this little top little thing up here to stick out about a 1/4 inch, just like that, if that makes sense. And then you're gonna line the rest of it up and just sew right down there, right like this. So having this stick up a little bit like this is going to guarantee that your lines will come out straight. So I'm just gonna start a 1/4 inch, and that is gonna be right where that intersection is. And I'm just gonna sew right down that seam. So I've sewn that down, my 1/4 inch. It started right where those two intersections met. And now I've sewn it down, and I've got this little extra piece hanging off here. So I'm just gonna cut that right off like that. Get rid of that. And now I can finger press that away from the center, just like so. And now my top lines up. I've got that little baby piece sticking up right there. I can also cut that off, but I don't really need to because I'm gonna end up trimming this block. So let's do the other one real quick now too. So again, all I have to do is take this center triangle and fold it over, and it's gonna line up perfectly with that piece that we just cut. So I'm just gonna sew a 1/4 inch right down that line. And I can just fold that over and finger press that triangle back to where it should be. And the second piece, I'm going to line up along the triangle with my little bit that sticks out right up at the top there. This is so easy. I don't know why I was so intimidated by triangles before this. And so that's sewn on, and I can use my scissors to cut off that little excess piece right there. And then I can finger press that away from the triangle. Just like that. So now I've got my two pieces that are opposites of each other, just like that. So now we're gonna trim them. So here's my blocks. I've got them pressed, and I did press the seams all going the same way on both of them. So here is how I trim these. I'm going to turn it to the side. I'm going to line the bottom of the triangle up with one of the lines on my cutting mat, just like that. And I'm going to put the 4.5 inch line along that bottom. And then my 2 inch line, I'm going to line right up to the point of that triangle, just like that. So my 4.5 inch line is on the bottom, and my 2 inch line is on that triangle. And then I'm just gonna cut right along the top there. Oh, sorry, I bumped you. And then I can turn it over and line up that with the 4.5 inch line. I mean, with the line on my cutting mat. And then again, 4.5 inches at the bottom, that 2 inch line right along that triangle. And I can cut just like so. So this block measures about 4.5 inches by 4 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one. I'm going to put it to the side so that bottom of the triangle lines up with a line on my cutting mat, which is going to be 4.5 inches. Oh, let's turn this over. And then my 2 inches will line right up to the top of that triangle. And then a nice cut. Let me just double check that. Yep, looks good. Flip it over. Again, line it up with a line on my cutting mat. 4.5 inches at the bottom, and then my 2 inch line goes right through the middle of that triangle, and cut off these little tabs at the bottom. There we go. So there I've got my 2 trimmed. Now I'm going to put these 2 together just like this. So this part's really easy. I'm just going to flip this over like this and line them up at the bottom. Run them through my machine. And open it up, and I'm going to press this to the dark triangle. So the seam will be going towards that dark triangle on all of them. And I'll iron that nice and flat. So that is going to be our block, and it's so easy. It just takes a couple steps, and I've put a bunch of them together. Let's see what I've got. So let's put that finishing touch right on this quilt. There we go. So as you can see, I've alternated the light and the dark. So on this block, for example, the dark is at the top and the light is at the bottom. And then on the next one, the light is at the top and the dark is at the bottom. So I've just alternated them like this. Now, if you want yours to be extra scrappy, you don't have to match the 2 pairs together. You can just mix them all up and add something that way. So that is awesome. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, is you can start with any size square. So obviously if you start with a 10-inch square instead of a 5-inch square, you'll have way less blocks than this because they will be definitely bigger. And also, as I mentioned before, you can use any size triangle template that you want. I just happen to use the little one, but you can use big triangles, little triangles. It just depends on the size square that you're starting with. So I'm going to sew these blocks together, and then I'm going to sew the rows together, and I'm going to alternate which direction I'm sewing the seam allowance. So for example, on the top row, I'm going to sew all the seam allowances to the right, and then on the next row, I'm going to sew all the seam allowances to the left, so that they will nest up really nicely once I sew the rows together. So let me get it all together and we'll see what it looks like. So here is the final quilt. It's super scrappy, but I was thinking if you wanted to, you could even make it more scrappy by not matching the 2 of the same ones together. You could just mix and match them all. So you could have the bottom of this one matched with the top of this one if you wanted to. So that's just an idea. If you wanted it super, super scrappy, I'm just gonna stick with super scrappy. To me, this looks kind of boho, really bohemian, with all the different fabric styles and colors all mixed together, which I really like that style. And I'm not gonna put a border around this. I'm just going to bind it after I quilt it. And so this quilt measures 45 by 56. I used, it's got seven blocks going up and down, and then it's got 13 going across. So that's a total of 91 blocks, which means that I used 182 5-inch squares, which really, really put a nice dent into my scrap stash, which is great. And as I mentioned before, I had one drawer full of 5-inch square. I mean, I had 2 drawers full of 5-inch squares, and now I only have 1. So that makes me happy. And I am not afraid of triangles anymore. I'm not afraid to do this now that I know that little trick of just sticking that little 1/4 inch up top after you fold that triangle over. So it just made it so easy, and it just was flawless almost every time. And so I encourage you to give this a shot, and I enjoyed making this one so much, and I can't tell you how fast it went. Well, I can, because it went super fast. So I encourage you to give it a shot. And like I said, if you want to use 10-inch squares, use 10-inch squares, use 8-inch squares, use 6-inch squares. I just went with I just used what I had. So I love it, and I hope you like it too. So if you do, please like, share, and subscribe. And again, I appreciate the support of everyone. I love talking to you in the comments, and it's super fun for me. So enjoy the rest of your day. And this is Suze from Revelation Quilts, signing out.